Welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
2023, companies are in a frenzy. They've flooded developers with an interesting request, a way to use generative AI to name pets after their favorite songs. Sounds absurd, right? Well, now while developers aren't being inundated with requests for pet names, they are really desperate to harness the power of AI for their unique challenges. They want a solution, something adaptable and transformative. I'm Brooke, and together with my co-hosts, we've already trained over 7,000 builders in machine learning on our hit Twitch show. Today, we're going to show you how the underlying tech that could name your pet after your favorite Taylor Swift anthem could be tweaked to solve real-world business challenges. The magic? It's all in the prompt. Let's dive into the world of generative AI. So I'm Brooke, and I'll be covering the ABCs of generative AI.
Fred Gratian, I'll be covering how we built it.
And I'm Ben Cashman. I'll be taking a look at our prompt and how we decided to do what we're doing with our application.
So now you know a little bit about us. We would like to know a little bit about you. If you haven't been in one of these sessions at re:Invent so far that has live polling, your job as the audience is to scan the little QR code up on screen and then punch in the code 974591. If you're watching at home on YouTube in the future, welcome. Enjoy living in the future. The thing won't be up for you, but it will be back later. All right, we've got some votes coming in.
That's quick.
This is really helpful because I think even a year ago, we would have all answered this quite differently. Ben and Fred, would you have answered this differently as well a year ago?
No, absolutely. I would have been right there at the top, too.
I would have told you XGBoost is great. Love XGBoost.
Right.
I will not accept any XGBoost slander here. I also like the first one that says, I don't use or build with generative AI. I would like to add yet to that one, because I think after the announcements that are happening in the keynote with Swami exactly right now, thank you for your dedication to coming to this instead, I think lots of that will change for a lot of people. So we're about to close out the poll. Please punch it in if you have not already. The clicker does work. So the ABCs of generative AI, if we swap back over, this started because I speak at conferences all over the world to different developers, and lots of people were coming to me and saying that, I know I'm a good developer, but I just don't know what to Google to figure out how to work with generative AI. There's so much jargon, I don't know where to start, and I can't get good and clear definitions for lots of the key concepts so I can then actually build. And then so I was just messaging people in DMs different things. Oh, this is what a transformer is. And then so I just made it as a blog post publicly. So you can view that here. We're not going to go through the full alphabet today. We will go through some key letters. But you can see it's this address, the ABCs of Gen AI. It goes through from A is for attention, to Z is for zero-shot learning. Yes, I said Z, not Z. I am from Australia. Yes. So we're skipping A, we're going straight to B. B is for Amazon Bedrock. Bedrock is the easiest way to build and scale generative AI apps with foundation models. So it's a fully managed service from AWS, which I imagine lots of you have heard about during this week. And it gives you really easy access to work with foundation models. Shockingly, foundation models are F, which are coming up later in this. But we're going to dive into this in much more detail in Ben's section later. So we can move right along from this, but you'll learn all about how to integrate and deploy foundation models into your apps. C is for Code Whisperer. Show of hands if you've used Code Whisperer already. Yes, same. Even my cat has, because when you're using Code Whisperer, you use the arrow keys to go between options, and you press tab to lock it in. I've got a tabby cat, so there's a video of the little tabby cat hand pressing the tab key. Now you'll all remember exactly how to use it. But it's your AI-powered productivity tool for the IDE and command line. So there's, I think, at least 15 languages supported now. Who knows how many that will be by the end of the week. And it's trained on billions of lines of code from Amazon internal code and also open source code. It takes in all sorts of things, even when your cursor is on the page, all sorts of different artifacts to give you what you're going to use. And when you're using Code Whisperer, I've done a lot of demonstrations and sessions about it. The biggest tip that I will give everyone, and it's the same tip I gave Fred, because Fred's going to be using Code Whisperer later on. So what happens is you write your code in plain English, and it then uses generative AI to convert that to code. So you're going to write your comment, it turns it to code. Think of when you're writing your comments, think of that as the prompt. So we're going to talk about prompt engineering later with Ben. Think about how you can prompt it to do what you're trying to do, especially if it's something that you're not sure how to communicate what you're trying to do. Thinking about it as a prompt, for me at least, helps me to get where I need to be going. As I promised, F is for foundation models. It is not the makeup kind, it is the building kind. So they're pre-trained with billions of parameters, and they can be applied to all sorts of different tasks. So they're foundation models because the hard work's been done for you. You've got a nice, neat foundation, then you can build on top of it. That's why it's a building-themed name. And it's going to help you to build generative AI apps quickly and easily, because building your foundation model from scratch is incredibly difficult, and also a lot of developers just won't need to do this for the different types of use cases that they're doing. If you would like to train one from scratch, talk to Ben after the session. Now the G word, generative AI, which I'm sure you've all been counting how many times you've heard that this week. So this can create new content like stories, music, conversations, and even videos. And it's powered by machine learning called foundation models. So if you think you've got machine learning models altogether, then there's a subset of that for artificial intelligence, subset of that for deep learning, and then there's generative AI nested in under that. If you would like to go into that in more detail, there's a video on my LinkedIn. But this is going to help you to do content creation without or with minimal human involvement, which is super useful for all sorts of different tasks, even things like code generation in Code Whisperer. This slide is how you can tell they let me pick my own images. L is for large language models. So this is a type of foundation model that specializes in language and text, obviously. So it can translate, it can predict text that will happen, and they're going to be using transformer neural networks. If you were in Mike's and Tiffany's session just before us, you would have heard more about transformers. If you would like to go into them in detail, T is for transformer in the ABCs of generative AI in that blog post. And they can learn a new task from just a few examples, as you'll see in our prompt with Ben later on. P is for prompt engineering. So it's a process of designing prompts to guide language models. And it involves being really specific about the keywords, the context, the input, even the formatting of what you're putting in, so that you can be sure of what you're going to get out. And it's about providing all the context that the model needs so it can perform well, even when there might be limited data going in. Ben has a fantastic formula for prompt engineering, specifically for Claude, that we're going to jump into later, and that will be one to watch as well. So now I've gone through the ABCs. I'm going to hand over to Fred, who's going to talk about what we're going to be building today.
All right, thanks, Brooke. And definitely take a look at Brooke's blog post. It's amazing, great set of material for going through all the generative AI aspects. So let's talk about what we're going to build here. So Brooke has her ABCs. I have my 1, 2, 3. So number one, so as a developer, right, if you're going to develop an application, so I'm a technical trainer, try to keep things simple, right? So I think of it every time I'm creating an application, remember these three things. Number one, everything in AWS is an API, an application programming interface, right? So basically, it's a contract. I'm going to call you, and I'm going to send you this information. You're going to process it, and you're going to return it to me in a certain format. That's all there is. So just remember that. Everything in AWS is an API. So it doesn't matter if I'm creating an S3 bucket. It doesn't matter if I'm creating a Lambda. It doesn't matter if I'm calling a Bedrock model. All those things are APIs. You just have to find out what the syntax is. So whatever language you're writing it in, or if it's a command line, what's the syntax? So that's number one. Number two, every API call goes through Identity and Access Management, or IAM. Every API call goes through IAM. So IAM is where we say, who are you? You're a user? You're an application? Okay, and so who are you, first of all? Are you allowed to do this thing? So what permissions do we give to that user, to that application? All right, so every one of our API calls, we're going to check. Do you have the rights to do what you're asking to do? Do you have the right to call that Bedrock model? Okay, number three. All API calls must be signed with an access key and a secret. So when you make those calls, we have a particular signature to make sure that there's no man in the middle or anything like that going on. So we say this is a valid signed call. It's a valid set of access keys and secrets. So those are my 1, 2, 3s. I'm going to come back to those throughout the next few slides. So let's talk a little bit about what we created. all right? So what we did for this to demonstrate this is we have a front-end application written with some JavaScript embedded in some HTML. That JavaScript then, remember what we have to, let's remember our mantra there, right? Is that everything's an API. So we're eventually going to be calling our Lambda in our second part of this. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get permissions. We have to get some permissions. Now, I could have hard-coded my access keys and secrets in my HTML file. Bad, don't do that. Don't ever do that, right? So no, what I'm going to do instead, in this case, I use Cognito, configured it to say, hey Cognito, I'm going to use an unauthenticated guest access, and I'm going to go to IAM and say, hey, IAM, give me a role to give me the permissions to do the thing I want to do. So the thing I want to do is I want to call that Lambda. Now, Lambda is going to call DynamoDB. It's going to call our Bedrock model. We're going to call it DynamoDB because I want to save all of the requests that people are. So you're going to give us some songs here in a minute. We're going to give you back some pet names. I want to record those. I want to kind of go back. Maybe I want to audit. How well was our model working? What were the choices that it made? Do we agree with those? Were there any of them that we don't, kind of think are that awesome? So what can we do to fine tune later on? I'm going to call Bedrock. We're going to call the Anthropic model using a prompt, and Ben's going to talk a little more about prompting here in a second. But I'm just calling an API, all right? So I just needed to know what was the syntax for invoking an API. That's it. And then finally, CloudWatch for anything that goes bump in the night, any kind of problems that I might have, or I just want to see, what was the timing between my calls and things like that. So anything like that I would want to log. So, it's a pretty, it's a simple, but it's a nice pattern, right? Because I'm not having to hard code anything in the front end. It's a simple pattern, and later on, in our blog post that we have, you can go to find out how you can actually get access to this code. Very easy to reproduce this in your Amazon account. All right. So again, what other tools do we use? We use Code Whisperer because I'm an application person by night. By day, I'm a trainer. Most of my career has been an IT plumber, so I'm not a software developer. So what I like is I can use Code Whisperer and give it some prompts and say, hey, I just need to create this. I need to create this DynamoDB table. I need to update this DynamoDB table. I need to scan that. I can just tell it those things. I don't have to remember that syntax. Let Code Whisperer help me with that syntax. I'm not a front-end developer for sure, so it was awesome to be able to use Code Whisperer to help me on that part. If you haven't, the other thing I used in this demo was the Serverless Application Model, or SAM. Why did I use SAM? There's a bunch of different ways that you can develop in AWS, but the Serverless Application Model I like because a couple of things. It's very simple. I put together my code. I say, hey, initialize my environment and deploy my code. And then it understands what I'm asking it to do. I give it a template. In that template, when you see that I gave it the instructions on, hey, what is it I'm creating? Oh, I'm creating a Lambda. Okay, cool. And I want to create a DynamoDB table. Okay. And here's the keys that it needs. And here's the role that my Lambda has that says you can go ahead and update that DynamoDB. So that's kind of nice. So that's why we use SAM. Again, I use all the front end using Code Whisperer because I am not, you'll see in my demo, I'm not the best graphic designer or anything like that, but we just wanted a POC, right? So we accomplished what we wanted. My 2 customers came to me and said, hey, we need this application and keep it simple. Because I tried chatbots and all that. No, we didn't need that. We needed something we could leave behind for you folks that's easy to reproduce.
We were very needy customers.
They're good customers. Demanding though, yeah. Very demanding. But so now the thing is, okay, well, what do we need to put into our application? Because there's that one part that I didn't know. I can do all the other stuff. I've done it a million times. But that last part about calling Bedrock. So I had to work with Ben because, and I would send Ben things. He's just like, Fred, no, you're making it too difficult. And so we worked together to come up with the prompt that we're going to show you, and it met our needs, right? So we worked out good. So we went through multiple iterations of the prompt, create a simple template. You'll see how I just used Python to incorporate your requests and then send that on to our model. And then with Ben's guidance, we decided to use the Anthropic Claude 2 model for our great for text generation, perfect for what we were trying to do. All right, so that's my piece. That I'm going to have Ben come up and talk a little bit more about, how we're going to build it.
Thanks, Fred. All right. So thanks for answering our poll earlier. I'm glad to be helping you all on your first steps into generative AI. And taking a look here, I think it's time we introduce the Amazon Bedrock service formally. So understanding, Brooke mentioned foundation models a little bit earlier. I like to think of Bedrock as a hub of a variety of different foundation models that you have available to you at your fingertips. Some of them are good at some things, and some are designed to be more specific to certain tasks. In this specific case, back to what Fred was saying a bit earlier, I'm a huge fan of the Keep It Simple framework, if you will. But taking a look from my experience as a solutions architect in the independent software vendor market, that's ISVs, we see folks doing a lot of different tasks. I'll just speak briefly about those for a moment. We have verticals that are using them in financial. We have folks that are doing them in cybersecurity. So thinking about, I've detected a threat. Okay, so I've classified a threat, but maybe I want to understand why we've classified that threat as a threat, generating an explanation of why it is that way. Another very common use case I'm seeing is the ability to empower our customers to adopt our services, and I say our services, the independent software vendor services as well, more easily. How many of you in here are a SQL developer? Okay, just a very sparse number of hands here. Would it be great if we could use natural language to generate SQL queries? Absolutely. So we can start to understand that some of our ISVs in the database market are also leveraging tools to make their databases and your data, which is where we derive value, more accessible to you as the customers. Bring it back to Bedrock. So you have the opportunity to choose from a variety of foundation models. Specifically in the demo and the POC that we've built out, we're leveraging Anthropic Claude, but I think we should definitely let you be aware of some of the other options that you have available to you. Something that we can do, we didn't necessarily do it in this POC, coming back to the Keep It Simple framework, but you can customize these models with your data. So if you haven't heard it yet, there's a technique called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. So we're enhancing the output of these models with data that we feed to the model at time of inference. That's getting a bit more technical. And you can connect it to your own data sources as well. So curious, anyone maybe heard of Amazon Q, maybe in the last couple days here as well. Okay, so these you can see Amazon is adopting these services. As I was mentioning, we're seeing in our ISV space as well. So let's take a look at what we currently have available for you today in the Bedrock ecosystem. We have our first-party models, which, if you take a look up at the screen right now, we have Amazon's Titan. We also have access to AI21 Labs. They are what we'll refer to as a third-party model. You may see that in some of our blog posts as 3P. We have Anthropic. Anthropic is actually what I did the prompt engineering for our POC today that we'll be taking a look at. We can talk about prompt engineering here in a moment in our next few slides. It's an iterative process. I'll just keep it at that. And then we also have access to Cohere models. So you'll have Titan embedding models coming back to Titan for our first party. We also have access to a Cohere embedding model in Bedrock as well. So if you're not familiar with embeddings, right, what that means is I'm taking my natural language, I'm feeding it through this model, and now I'm representing it in numeric format or vectors. Then something, so I've mentioned first party, I've mentioned third party models, but we should also be aware of open source as well. So that's where the Llama comes in. Brooke had a slide earlier with the Llama model earlier on. So we should be understanding that Llama is available to you. And if you have any use cases where maybe you're interested in developing marketing collateral, You can do text to image as well with Stability AI. Okay, our prompt. So I happen to be a big Beatles fan. The genesis of this project was, okay, what kind of pet names can I come up with if I talk to this large language model and say, my favorite Beatles song is Dear Prudence. And Claude came up and it said, Prudy. It's like, that's pretty good. Okay, we can develop a simple POC use case, which is, as a demanding customer friend,
right,
we built this thing out. So prompt engineering is going to be different across your various different models. And I want to point that out because if you take a look at this particular prompt, and I apologize, we probably should have had it at the top and the bottom as well, but if you take a look at this example section here in the middle, it says human, and it also says assistant. So when it says human, this is what I'm expecting my user input to be. So Dear Prudence by the Beatles. And then I'm giving it an example in this particular case where I say assistant. And when it says assistant, this is what I would expect the model to come up with. So any particular prompt that you feed over to Bedrock, if you're using specifically Anthropic's Claude, will need to use human and assistant. And something that I have found to be incredibly effective when leveraging these various different large language models is to tell the model who they are and what they're supposed to be doing. So in this particular case, you can see we've highlighted role. And in this case, I'm saying, you're a pet naming expert. Okay? But not just any pet naming expert, a pet naming expert based on song titles, the name, and the artist that's being provided as well. Something else that these large language models tend to do very well is they follow rules, to say the least. So as an example, Fred, I know we did a Twitch series together. What was your pet's name?
Mocha.
How could you forget?
Yeah,
For the uninitiated, we featured Mocha heavily in the series. So were you watching or just on the show?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Mocha's a very good short name.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we take a look at rule number 3 here, I probably don't want a 13-syllable pet name coming out of Dear Prudence, frankly. So I can specify that in my rules. I didn't mean to forget Mocha. I'm sorry, Fred.
That's right. But she falls in your category, so we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. So some other things I'm asking the model to do, I'm saying, okay, it's got to be creative. You must provide at least 4 options, right? So just providing me Prudy, okay, that's great, but maybe I might want some more inspiration there for things for me to choose from. And then explain your choices. So giving the model a set of rules, and then something Brooke mentioned earlier, zero-shot learning. Mm-hmm. This right here is not zero-shot learning. This is actually single-shot learning where I've now specified, I'm going to give the model an example. So coming back to our ISV market, thinking about generating SQL queries, it would be really helpful if I could let the model know, based on this user input, this would be an expected output. And that may be a very specific SQL query. In this case, Dear Prudence, we've got Prudy, Sunshine, Deary, and Sunny, in my opinion, would all be decent names for this model to come up with. Then we need to feed in the user input. So all of these things I have just shared with you are abstracted away from your users. They don't get to see this, right? So they may see a text box, which we'll show here in a little bit with Fred. You'll input some information, and you'll generate the output through a really nice user interface. So you take the user input, and at this point, the model should have an understanding what it's supposed to do. And something else I've seen across large language models, if you give it one more sort of command, and it doesn't highlight it on the next slide here, but based on the song title and artist provided, give me at least 4 pet names. It's very well attuned for the final portion of the prompt that's being sent over to the model. All right. So let's get into why we built it this way, Fred.
Okay.
Yeah. This part is, I'm extremely online. I make a lot of content. This part, alternate title, is pre-answering lots of comments I would get on social media if we posted about this. So on this architecture, Ben and Fred, why did you choose Cognito?
Right. I mean, the biggest thing is like I wanted to have that security posture. Again, you don't want to have put your access keys and secrets, right? So it just gives you a secure way to have that. Now, the only also the other aspect of this is the IAM role that gets served up that's assigned to that unauthenticated guest role through Cognito only can call that Lambda, for example, right? So you would have to call the Cognito, so you'll specify your Cognito configuration to your role, to your Lambda, right? But the nice thing is, again, it's just those access keys and secrets. I don't have to store anything in that front end. You never want to do that.
Right.
And we're not, and sorry, one more thing is that we use unauthenticated. We're one step away. If we add authentication to the front of this, then we can just get authenticated users instead, right?
Yeah, and so this is really a proof of concept. This isn't production ready, but that's the point of it. Like, we know you're not going to use this for pets, but it's really about how can I take a prompt and put it on an absolutely minimum viable front end so that you can have the whole piece there. Ben, I guess if one of your customers wanted to extend this out for production, what are some different considerations they'd need to take into account?
Yeah, so Fred mentioned it a little bit earlier, being able to understand what's happening with the inputs and the outputs of the model. Something I can see being very helpful is keeping track from a security perspective of who's trying to make calls, or back to Fred's mantra, what may be making the calls,
right?
Because everything in AWS is an API call. That means services can make API calls over to Bedrock. So something that we don't highlight in this particular architectural diagram is Cloud Trail, right? So we can keep an eye on what's happening within the cloud.
Mm-hmm. And I think also that if you look at that invoke the Bedrock, you did Anthropic, guess what? So one line change to change to a different model. So that's the other aspect of this. It's pretty simple to try. So you're going to hear all these announcements this week. Take this one, swap in. Slight changes you might have to do in the responses and things like that. We'll talk about a little bit when I demo some of the code here. But yeah, it's pretty simple to now try a different model. I had it before, and we simplified it. I had 20 of them that we were trying and everything else, but we realized, no, we don't need that. Mm-hmm. I need to follow what my customers ask for and give them what they ask for. So I did.
Yeah. And we will be taking questions at the end, so if you've started thinking of something you would like to ask, keep it in your pocket. We will take those at the end. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Oh boy. Excellent. So guess what, folks? It is demo time. All right, so the first demo I'm going to do is walk you through Code Whisperer and how I use it to come up with the DynamoDB code that I needed. Okay?
Do we need to swap to your...
I will, yes.
Screen?
And
look at that.
All right, there we go. So, because I'm a horrible typer, there's no way I was going to try and code this by hand. So I'm going to do this via a little quick video here. All right, so we're going to start off here, and you're going to see that we're going to just kind of go through, just look on the left-hand side. This is VS Code running Code Whisperer. So went through here, so just making sure Code Whisperer is on, everything else. You'll see you have to log in with your builder ID and things like that. But now I'm going to give it a prompt, all right? So don't think of this as a comment as much as a prompt. So the way that in Python, the prompt or the comment is the hash with the comment. So here I'm asking it, create just a simple Python function and update table. Now notice what it did there. It's kind of interesting. If we can just back that up a little bit here. I'm not quick enough on my mouse here. So I'm asking it to do that. There we go. So I'm asking it to create this simple function, right? Is it running?
Yeah, while this is loading, if you're ever having trouble getting Code Whisperer to pop up for you, I think in Mac it's Option C, and it's something very similar in Windows, but look that up. if that ever just stops where it's not coming up for you, if you're me and, for example, swap between several accounts for demo purposes, this can happen. So you just Option C and your examples will come straight back up.
Okay, so we'll let it go here. So again, so it's going to come up with that comment. I backed it up a little bit. Watch when it pops up. The code that it pops up is for a SQLite database. Well, I don't want a SQLite database. I want a DynamoDB table, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm like, okay, thanks for that suggestion, but I don't want to use that suggestion, right? I don't want a SQLite table. I want DynamoDB. So I need to give it another prompt. I'm going to tell it, hey, give me a prompt to create a table where my model ID is my key field, and then my date time is my sort key, okay? So now I'm giving it, I even told it what's going to be passed in as results and everything else. So that here's, let it go ahead and create that code for me now. And this is nice because as much as I've done things with DynamoDB in the past, I don't do it that often. And sometimes now here I'm in Python, but maybe I wanted to do this in Java or some other language, right? So now here it gives me all of the syntax here. And I noticed that it threw me BOA208 in the date time here. So I'm like, well, I really don't want those in that function. I'm going to pull those out and put it at the top. Simple, but it still gave me everything I needed. It knew that I didn't have those yet and put those in there, which is pretty cool. All right, so next thing I want to do is, all right, cool. I want to be able to scan the records that I put into this. So let's see if we can ask it to create a function. So you create a function to scan that table and return all the items. Give it the pet name and the thing, and there we go. Give me the syntax for scanning. And that's when I messed that up quite a bit. The return items piece, I've messed that up when I've coded this by hand. So I like that. I'm like, cool, thank you very much. I want just simple Python now that just says, hey, give me a main function and call both of those things in that order. All right? And get my little main function. Now watch, I'm going to be really brave here. It would have been really brave if I had actually been running this and typing it, but I'm going to run it without debugging. Okay? So let's see what happens. So we should get hello reInvent 2023 to come out of here in the response. Hopefully it doesn't get cut off too much. Yeah, it's hard to see, but you can see behind my my prompt here, the screen, it did return our hello 2023. Let's do one more though, because we want to give a good shout out to Code Whisperer. So why not? Yeah. So the resolution on the screen is a little bit different here, but we should be able to see in the bottom, Code Whisperer. This is so cool. One more update to our table. Now, this is the code that then I put into our application to then take all your prompts in. Okay? So this is actually the code that I just literally took from this and pasted into my application. Okay? All right, so that's a real quick Code Whisperer piece. Let's spend a little bit of time on some of the application pieces here. So if we look at this is the front end piece. So in here, here we go. So here, these are not real identity pools because I wouldn't want to give you my identity pools, but they're hashed out. So this will be the code that you'll get, if you download the app. But here, so there's some instructions on how you set this piece up. But this is the call to the API call that I'm going to make to get the credentials for my front-end app. 4 or 5 lines of code, get that thing. So once I've set up my role and I've set up Cognito, now you can think of this as I've got some temporary access keys and secrets. So now from the front end, go down here, put in our function name. That's our Lambda function. And then there's the Lambda invoke. That's your API call. Okay? So all I need to know is what in Python, BOA208, what do I have to do to invoke my Lambda? And that's it for the front end. Pretty simple. Now, probably the most challenging aspect of this stuff, to be honest with you, is the return values coming back in the JSON and manipulating the JSON. But other than that, because I'm not a front-end developer, but that's nice. Yes. But that was nice to be able to use things like Code Whisperer to help you with that. So let's look here inside. This is the Lambda application, okay? So now this was based on the prompt that my engineer gave me here. So this is my way. This is probably not the only way to invoke this, but this is where we're putting the prompt in. So now I'm coding this into my Lambda. This is the thing. I'm going to formulate this call, the prompt, to send to our Anthropic code.
And just to spotlight this, if you're used to using LLMs only through a chat interface and you've wanted to know how to get it going with some sort of a front end, this is the answer here. So when we're talking about the different abstractions earlier in Ben's section, yeah, this is really how Fred's done this.
Yeah, exactly. And there are, like I said, there are many ways. We could have sent this in as an entire block, from the front end, but then we'd have to code that. So here we're doing this, and then all I'm doing is, you'll see I'm sending in titles. So that's the piece that we're going to get from you in a minute. We're going to pass this in here. We're formatting this thing. As Ben said, we got the human and assistant aspects of how Anthropic wants this call to come in. So just a real quick little thing here. this is where I'm kind of formatting it so it's in that human and assistant format. All right, so I can take that, put it in there, because that's what Anthropic's going to want. So if this was a different model, you could take the same prompt, but you'd have to specify it differently when you invoke that particular model, because they each have a different way that they do that. So the temperature is interesting. So we've got this thing dialed up to be as creative as we want it to be, right? So we want this to be generative, and anything more you want to say on some of these, Ben? Just some of the choices we made here?
Yeah. So we told the model to be creative, but one of the parameters, and this can be configured. So temperature at 1, we're asking it to be, the way I like to say it is, as creative as possible. Now, that's really good for naming a pet, frankly, in my opinion. But just coming back to the use case that we talked about a little bit earlier, generating SQL queries, I really don't want it being creative on that. Not at all.
Right.
So in that particular case, that 1 is going to hedge way closer towards 0 in that particular case.
Yeah. And this is really important to communicate to your executives and business leaders or people asking you to build things like this. That's what I did for a job before I got my current job. And so much of it is just giving people a shared vocabulary, because they might not even have words to fully describe what they're trying to ask you to do. So as a developer, it's a great place to step up. If you give people words to talk about what you're trying to do, they'll be able to talk about it with you, and you'll get to a much better response. So if you're starting to get asked about generative AI, having conversations about what temperature you want to set, even things like top P with your executives, that's going to really bring them into the development process and help to understand what's happening, and then even showing them, if you change this parameter, this is what's going to happen. So if I pull this lever, this is what happens. Things like that, they're going to ask you better questions, and it's going to be so much less frustrating for you long term if you've given them some shared vocabulary, and this is a great place to start for generative AI.
Yeah, I started with slider things and all kinds of things that, where you could pass these in, and I'm like, we're going to keep it simple.
There's sliders in Party Rock in the advanced settings.
Yes.
The initiated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good call. And here is, guess what? Another API call. So now this Lambda has permissions to invoke Bedrock. There's some other things you'll do, and it's documented in our blog post on how you get permissions to be able to use those Bedrock models. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Do you have to give API keys or anything there, Fred, or does Bedrock even have API keys?
Not in this case. No, I didn't need any API calls because I'm just invoking the Bedrock API. So that's pretty much. So that's just awesome because I can do this in many different contexts. All I have to do, it's just like any other API. That's what I love about it. To your point, Ben, that's absolutely right. So we're following all the same rules. All right, so we're going to switch back real quick. And Brooke, you want to take us through this section here? We're going to kind of swap back and forth here a little bit.
Yeah, so we need an input to put in to what we've built now. So another poll. So without your camera again, it's the same address, you just put the different code in this time. The code is 532328. And you'll be able to select your favorite song from a list. Sorry, Fred.
No problem.
Scrolling up so I can see the options. I think this poll, is this the one with Hey Jude by the Beatles, Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin, Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys, and I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, and Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix? I wasn't born when these songs were out. Maybe you weren't as well. But out of all the things that you can research after reInvent, looking up these songs, if you're not familiar with them, is a great place to start. Very excited to see how this is going to turn out, because this is a lot closer than I expected.
This is good.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite on this list, Ben?
I absolutely do. Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix.
Right. For the uninitiated, Ben would play his guitar on our Twitch stream when things were running and loading and things like that. So Ben's really underselling how much of a music fan he is. You can watch in our recordings. Do you have a favorite from this list, Fred?
Yeah, Good Vibrations. I'm a Beatles person, or a Beach Boys person. That's my era, so yeah.
All
I
right.
was born 2 years before that. But.
Well, it looks like the winner. I'm going to give you about...
This is crazy.
Oh, I see some cameras coming out to... they're taking photos of the thing. I'm going to close the poll now because it's settled down. So Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. Do you want to swap back over, Fred?
Okay, here we go. So Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix.
Oh.
Our
Sorry,
screen
Fred.
switched there, Fred.
Oh,
We are good.
come on, Ben. There, whoop, hang on, come on.
We are just looking for the one with Fred.
There we go.
We have found it.
All right.
How
so
good is our front end? See, when we talked about a proof of concept and minimum viable, this is really able to get your point across so you can show that something happens. Obviously, the way you wrap that up, you can then do with whatever you actually wanted to do for your front end. But this is what we're talking about, of just having something where you can start with the thing.
And I probably typed it wrong, but I think our models will be able to figure it out. So we're going to go fetch our names.
And then it's fetching because it's pet themed.
So remember now, what do? We went out to Cognito. We got an access key. We signed the call. We call Lambda. Lambda's calling our model, sending in our prompt, and then returning us some results.
Yes. All right.
So, okay.
Do you want to read them out, Fred?
Sure, we got what? Hazy, perps, indigo. Hang on a second. Indigo is 3. If you remember our prompt, it said should be less than 2 syllables. It didn't say must, right?
Because this is good. We found this a lot with the different models. Sometimes when there was a really good one, it did more than the 2 syllables, and I was never mad about it.
No.
But
Yeah. All right, back to our poll. Everybody good?
Oh, so the other thing, sorry, just before you switch off this, Fred, it gives you the name and then a description, which is really helpful because it helps to understand where the model's coming from. If you're not familiar with the lyrics of the song, some of these would seem a bit wild, but it's a good way to see what's happening. And additionally, because we've got 4 options here to choose from, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket, and we really do have different ways to choose from this. Sometimes for an output, you just need one single output, but this is all about understanding your demanding customers and working out how you can best serve them. Because usually from all the tests we've done on this in our extensive application testing, we've all been pretty happy with at least one of them on the list, so it's always been really good to see. Do you want to swap us back over to the next poll for Rhett?
One more note on that, though, Brooke.
Yeah.
So explaining something, incredibly helpful. I mentioned a use case around this for cybersecurity. A threat was detected. Great, we've classified that. But why? And can the model tell us why, based on the information we've provided it, why that is? So, why did we pick Prudy?
Yeah, and just while people are filling out this poll currently, so the code is 528683, being able to answer why is really important. One thing that would happen when I was designing machine learning systems for people, they would always say, could we do this? And I would say, should you? Like, how far can you actually get with this? Or if you do get the answer, you can predict what you wanted, what are you going to do with it? So having this why part is really helpful context when you're working with it. Look at this. So the options, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, Hotel California. Oh, something moved. Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, and Dream On by Aerosmith. Fred, do you have a favorite from this list?
Hotel California would have been mine, so not to influence the audience at all, but all
how about
right.
you, Ben?
I'm just going to go with the popular opinion on this one. Bohemian Rhapsody is an excellent song, and the movie was good too.
Bohemian Rhapsody has a lot of cat energy, I think. Does anyone have a pet with Born to Run energy? Because yes. But Bohemian Rhapsody, we're going to pop that into the model in just a second. I'm going to swap back to Fred's screen.
Okay, we're good.
He already typed it in.
Which is crazy. All right. So again, out to Cognito. We're getting our access key. We're going to sign the call. We're going to call our Lambda. Our Lambda is going to invoke our model. We're also recording all of this stuff in DynamoDB and all in the CloudWatch. And we get this. So yeah, here's Galileo again. So that was
Do you want to read these out, Fred? The options
sure,
we've got.
Raps, Mama. So that's interesting. Galileo, Figaro. That's a pretty good one, right? That would be I like that one.
The last two, more than 2 syllables, but once again, I'm willing to allow it. Do you have a favorite from this list, Ben?
You know, as far as a pet name goes, Galileo's pretty good.
It's a strong name, yeah.
Yeah. Figaro's already in a Disney movie, right? So we got that. All right, we have one more, I think.
One more poll. So the newest code is 5, no, that's not a 5, that's a 3. I know how to read, 324320. So the options for this are Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, Every Breath You Take by The Police, With or Without You by U2, Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, and Eye of a Tiger by Survivor. Do you have a favorite, Ben, from this list?
Sweet Child of Mine's pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah.
the crowd agrees, it seems. If you don't agree with Ben, now's your chance to run it. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my answer. Yeah, it's Eye of the Tiger.
Right.
You know, for sure. Big Rocky fan.
I think in terms
Right.
of pet names, though, like Every Breath You Take, when my cat's just watching me sleep or something, and I just can never escape, it's very accurate. Oh, but things are changing.
Yeah, it's getting close.
If you'd like to choose a side between Sweet Child of Mine and Living on a Prayer, now is your time to shine. But it looks like it's settling down. You get to type in the whole name, Fred. You're going to be so excited about it. Sweet Child O' Mine by Guns N' Roses. We will swap over momentarily.
All righty. One more time. Let's go fetch those names.
Yes.
Remember our mantra, we're calling our API, we're going to go get our access keys, we're going to assign our access keys, we're going to call our Lambda's going to invoke our function.
Love
Give
this
us back.
commentator voice. The other thing I'd like to point out, so you can see in this top line of the prompt, Guns and Roses is not and, it's an and, but the model still knew what we were talking about. So depending on the use case that you end up using this for, if you don't use it for your pet names, thinking about where it can and can't figure out what you mean is going to be a really important edge case, depending on how important that result is for your business. Have you seen any applications of that with your customers, Ben, of people working with hazy inputs?
You know, I've created some hazy inputs and have delighted some folks with them regardless
Were they
of my
purple?
spelling errors. There's a few of them. But underlying everything that's going underneath, it's the semantic meaning of the words. So if folks are familiar with that. Classic example is king and queen are very similar in meaning in space. And so that's really what's happening with these models is they're understanding your input based on, you know, numeric representations of words.
Yeah.
And that's how they are able to map those semantic similarities.
You can learn more about it. E is for embeddings, and V is for vector databases in the ABCs that will go into that with more detail. So, next steps. I would like to preface this. Was anyone here early and saw me actively cheering off stage? That's because that was the moment this blog post went live. Thank you so much to our content team. I absolutely terrorized them this morning. But everything we've talked about is on a blog post right now. So this is on a blog called AWS Community, so it's community.aws. It's where I post all of my AWS content, including this one, which we co-wrote together. And this is going to step you through how to build on this. If you can't scan the QR, the address is s12d.com/session code, BOA208. If you're watching in the future, maybe this will even be updated a little bit when you see it, but hopefully we'll be able to put the link in the video description for you. There's so many different blogs on here from different other people in DevRel, other people in the community. It's a very underground AWS blog, but it's where I've been excited about posting my stuff. So there's this post here, as well as the ABCs of generative AI are on this page. I also have a post about how to learn generative AI from scratch, and this and some others. So keep in touch. We're going to answer some questions now. So if you have a question,